Member for Kew.
Thank you very much, Acting Speaker. I too rise on the Regulatory Legislation Amendment Reform Bill 2025 and note that this bill contains largely administrative and housekeeping measures that the Coalition will not be opposing. Acting Speaker, I wanted to speak about one amendment in particular to begin with, and as it relates to the Domestic Animals Act 1994. I met last year with a constituent in the electorate of Kew who very sadly lost her dog after it was attacked by another dog. And the constituent was very, very concerned, and I raised this with the Minister for Agriculture at the time, that the Domestic Animals Act did not provide enough guidance to councils when it came to actually declaring dangerous dogs. Now, sadly, Acting Speaker, this incident was preceded by multiple threatening encounters with the same dog over a number of years, and then tragically ended with the death of the constituent's dog. But sadly, to the constituents' disappointment and concern, Boroondara Council did not declare the dog as a dangerous dog for the purpose of Section 34 of the Domestic Animals Act 1994, following the fatal incident. And it indicates, this section of the Act, that Council may exercise a discretion to declare a dog dangerous if the dog has caused the death of a serious injury to a person or animal by biting or attacking that person or animal. However, as I said, Acting Speaker, there's no specific guidance as to how that discretion should actually be exercised by councils. And because of that, Boroondara Council in this case, has established its own internal assessment processes for declaring dogs dangerous, which they have informed me implements VCAT's criteria. And the constituent in this case is very concerned that this process is insufficient to prevent dogs, such as the one that was killed, from causing further harm. Now, I note that the bill before us today does make a number of amendments, and sensible amendments, to the Domestic Animals Act, and one of those being the fact that if a individual is to shift between councils and their dog has been, or their animal has been declared dangerous, it must be notified, which was an issue that was raised in this case as the offending dog was shifting between councils. But it does not go as far to deal with the issues that I've outlined today around the declaration of dangerous dogs in particular. And I would suggest, as I have to the Minister for Agriculture previously, that we look at whether Section 34 of the Domestic Animals Act should have a greater review, and whether more specific guidance should be given to local councils as to how this section should be exercised, and so that councils are not left to themselves when it comes to implementing the criteria. I think all of us in this place, Acting Speaker, who have pets know that they are part of our family, and the loss of a pet can be absolutely heartbreaking, and in this case it happened in such a tragic way in their own street with this dog that had caused the family much concern for many years, and then ultimately resulted in a fatality of their own dog. So again, Acting Speaker, can I suggest to the Minister that while the changes to the Domestic Animals Act are welcome in this piece of legislation, it is worthy of further review in terms of how do we provide greater guidance to local councils as to make sure that if there is an incident with a dog or any animal, and there is a risk of that animal committing that incident again, then we look at how the guidance around declaring animals dangerous is given greater guidance to local councils. Acting Speaker, more broadly on this piece of legislation, I would note that this is a bill that speaks to supposedly regulatory reform and removing the burden of red tape on businesses and industry in this state. Yet it's very, very unclear from this piece of legislation and the number of amendments it makes to many pieces of legislation how the burden on business in this state will actually be alleviated through any of these reforms. Victoria has gone from what was once seen as one of the best regulatory systems a decade ago to one of the worst in the country. And the Andrews government, upon assuming power, did dismantle key elements of the regulatory management system. It abolished red tape reduction targets. It abolished the Victorian Competition and Efficiency Commission. And the quality of regulatory impact statements have declined under this government. Indeed, nearly 10 years ago, the Auditor General found, and I quote, "Gaps and weaknesses in the review processes for new or renewed regulation have added or maintained red tape that has not been adequately tested to ensure its necessity or efficiency. As there has been no central coordinated oversight of these review processes, it is unclear to what extent untested regulation has negated the gains from red tape deduction programs." Well, Acting Speaker, this bill does absolutely nothing to reduce the layers of red tape that are crippling businesses in this state. But don't have to take my word for it. We've heard from those opposite a shopping list of reforms that have supposedly made it easy to do business in this state. But you only have to turn to the experts, those who actually operate businesses in this state. And if I turn to the Business Council of Australia's Regulation Rumble 2024, it ranked Victoria last for overall business settings and found, and I quote, "With a low ranking for its property taxes and charges, payroll taxes and business licensing requirements, the state has much room for improvement if it is to attract and generate business-driven growth." Now, across specific areas impacting business conditions, the survey ranked Victoria last for overall taxation, regulatory costs and trading regulations, with Victoria's property tax settings the least competitive nationally. It was ranked 7th for overall licensing, administration and compliance issues, 6th for the cost of workers' compensation schemes, with premiums above the national average, and we know how those premiums are hitting small businesses time and time again, and 5th for planning and building permitting systems. There is no doubt that businesses are suffering the highest regulatory burden in the nation under the Allan Labor government. And the BCA isn't the only organisation belling the cat. Just turn to the NAB regulatory impact analysis. Now, this was commissioned by the Department of Treasury and Finance, so it was a regulatory impact analysis actually commissioned by the government. Now, it's only seen the light of day, though, Acting Speaker, because we on this side of the House actually FOI'd it to make sure that we could understand what the impacts were on businesses as a result of this analysis. The government was keen to hide it away. And let me tell you why they were keen to hide it away. Because the survey found that Victorian businesses experienced the worst impact of state government regulation in the nation. Victorian businesses experienced the most difficulty in complying with state government regulation. And the impact of state government regulation was most acutely felt in the manufacturing sector, followed by retail, wholesale and construction. And 45% of respondents identified compliance requirements as the driver of worse government regulatory impacts. This was a survey commissioned by the government and then put in the bottom drawer so it wouldn't see the light of day, because it revealed just how crippling red tape is in this state under the Allan Labor government. And if you don't want to listen to the BCA and you don't want to listen to NAB, then let's listen to the Victorian Chamber of Industry. More than half of national businesses that the Chamber surveyed said Victoria was the hardest place to do business in the state. Now, putting all of that impact on one side, you'd have to think today, after listening to those opposite, that there have been floods of red tape reform over the past decade. But we know that, in fact, the government has sat on red tape reforms, worth up to $1.6 billion in savings for industry and business a year. Acting Speaker, this is what this bill should be about. It should be actually about reducing the red tape on business in this state to make it easier to do business and to ensure that those people in Victoria who put their livelihoods on the line to run their own small businesses are not hampered by doing so because of regulations put in place by this government. Now, the government sought advice on how to encourage departments to reduce the number of business licences in Victoria as part of this $1.6 billion, but they haven't acted on it. Acting Speaker, today we have in front of us a bill that does nothing to make it easier to do business in this state. Red tape is crippling Victorian industry, and it's because this government cannot manage money, and Victorian businesses and Victorians are paying the price.